We need demographics represented. We have a great group of young people here. We have folks in the middle area like myself. So we have the generations coming together for freedom. It's a wonderful thing. That's the only way we're going to really succeed. One of the things that I do normally is I like to present a little bit about the 10th Amendment Center, where the 10th Amendment Center originated from, what it is that we try and do, how we got here in Florida. Alex is giving out right now, he's giving out a sheet called Basic 10th Resources, and they're just things that, if you don't know too much about 10th Amendment and nullification, interposition, these are the basic reading materials. They're certainly not the be-all or end-all of your education. We sell a bit of it at the 10th Amendment Center. The book that we do publish is this, the original Constitution, what it said, what it meant, what does it go through the Constitution, tells you why every word was used, every phrase was used, the legal definition behind it. It's not just thrown together. As the occupant of the Oval Office in the White House likes to say, we could not possibly know what was on the framers and the ratifiers' minds at the time of writing the Constitution and accepting it. Actually not true. There's enough of a historical record that we can know what was on their mind. We know why they wrote the document. We even know why it looks the way it looks as an 18th century legal document. So this book really, it's not a start at the beginning or end at the end like novel type read. It's a reference book. It's like a physician's desk reference, except it's like a Liberty desk reference. And you can get it at 10th Amendment Center for $24.95, shipping included, or you can get it with a t-shirt out of the trunk of my car for $25. Yeah. I think the 10th Amendment and state interposition, people call states' rights, state sovereignty, is very important. And the reason is because our nation, when initially setting out to improve on the Articles of Confederation, it was conceived to be a dual sovereignty system. The states being sovereign and independent, and unlimited powers government formed to handle certain things for them that they couldn't do well for themselves, like trade, foreign relations, maintaining defense, things like that. So, this place a lot of people are talking about today, the federal government intrusion taking over, it's not supposed to be that way. Does your head ever explode when you hear people like Congressman Conyers say that we can do whatever we want, and Nancy Pelosi saying, when people say, where in the Constitution are you given that authority, and she looks at you and says, are you serious? And we're serious? Because all of the problems that we have in what they're doing really can be solved with strict adherence to the 10th Amendment, because they can only do what they're enumerated to do. That's the idea behind it. It wasn't to give them carte blanche. So when they say things like that, we know it's out of control, and it just makes your head burst. I know everybody here gets emails. You get thousands of emails every day, and they all start out, urgent alert, must do this today, call Marco Rubio, call this guy, call that. And to what extent? Really, to what extent? The place to stop this out-of-control rogue government is in the state, because the state has much more power than it's using. And it's up to us to get the people that I refer to as federal supremacists. It's up to us to get them out of government and get people in government that understand that. We have enough federal supremacists in Washington. We don't need a junior league in Tallahassee of federal supremacists. The 10th Amendment Center, it was started in 2006 by Michael Bolden, and it's grown since then. We have chapters in, probably about 30 states right now. If you know Michael, he's on the radio all the time. He's always writing articles. He's built this organization into something that's really a force now. Tom Woods writes for us. Kevin Gusman writes for us. Rob Nadelson wrote a book for us. He writes for us. Joel Poindexter, who's an author at the Mises Institute, writes for us and is a chapter leader. I mean, he's put together an enormous array of talent to bring the message of this freedom and enumerated government, limited constitutional government. And he's done that in a short period of time. And one of the things that Michael is really good at is he stays focused. And just like you guys were alluding to, that you have principles, you have core beliefs of your organization, we have them too. And I'll just go over them with you very quickly, because I think it's important to understand when all that noise and all that buzzing around you is going off and your emails exploded and you're getting texts, we get too much information. Back when I was the marketing director for the Southeast United States for Golden Corral, at that time we used to say that person would get bombarded, and we use the word, an archaic term, bombarded with about 4,000 electronic messages a day, you know, between radio, TV, or even reading newspaper. You know, that was a lot of information. Well, today, imagine you got text, you got your telephone. Your telephone in your pocket has more computer power than what took Apollo 9 to the moon. It's incredible. So you're always getting beat up by stuff, and everything's urgent, because everything's got to happen now. It's got to happen now, or the world is going to fall apart, but that's nothing new. Okay? Because that was the impetus of getting the Constitutional Convention together. It was crisis. The Articles of Confederation weren't strong enough. So we need something to give government what they called in those days more energy. They want a more energetic government. Some wanted a strong national government, very little power to the states. Fortunately, those guys didn't succeed at that time. But as we like to say, Hamilton is winning from the grave. Yeah. But we stay focused in spite of all those things. You know, if you interview Michael, if you read him, he's never, you know, he doesn't get caught up in presidential politics. He doesn't get caught up in things. He's very focused. And these are the simple core beliefs that we have. First, rights are not granted to us by the government. They're ours by our nature. They're our birthright. All just political authority is derived from the people. Government exists only with our consent. And we have to be more choosy in giving that consent. And we have to have, I think, in Florida, a better mechanism to withdraw that consent instead of waiting 2 years or 4 years. We, the people of the several states, created the federal government, not the other way around. That's been inverted. That's been turned on its head, shaken out, and everything. The 10th Amendment defines the total scope of federal power as being that which has been delegated by the people to the federal government in the Constitution. Nothing more. Really nothing more. They can't claim things they're not given because whatever, it's a very simple concept, whatever is not given is reserved. And we've reserved almost everything. If you read that paper, if you read through this book, what we set about to do, we reserved, as I believe it was Jefferson said, the large residuary masses to the states. Yeah, you also, you know, Joe referred to Elbridge Gerry earlier. You know, later in his congressional career, he said the terminology, I'm not quoting exactly, but the terminology of Federalists and Anti-Federalists was really not quite correct. It should have been rats and anti-rats. Well, you know, the rats are running around rampant today. The people of each state have the sole and exclusive right and power to govern themselves in all areas not delegated to their government. Okay? Yeah, we reserve everything that we have not delegated. A government without limits is tyranny. Plain and simple. When Congress enacts laws and regulations that are not made in pursuance of the powers enumerated in the Constitution, the people are not bound to obey them. And that's simple. Nullification, I know everybody wants to hear about nullification. Last night I got a voicemail from a representative in Oklahoma, chairman of the States' Rights Committee, want to talk about what was going on and different things in Florida, what legislation models that we had and everything. I mean, nullification is blowing up around the country. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Not doing much here in Florida, but it's a wonderful thing because, you know, prior to 2010, there wasn't a lot of talking going on about nullification. We were fortunate enough to have what we refer to as 10-10-10, Nullify Now Orlando, which was the second Nullify Now event. It was the first one in the state. We were fortunate to have that coincide with Tom Woods' book, Nullification, How to Resist Tyranny in the 21st Century, which is really a must-read. We were fortunate to have Tom there, introduce the book. It was over, and people started talking about it, and people are continuing to talk about it. And it's a conversation now that's not going to go away. It's not going to be maligned, it's not going to be belittled, it's not going to go away. Why? Because, as Jefferson said, it's the rightful remedy. It's the correct remedy. And today, because of the tyrannical government that we have, it's a moral imperative that we stand up for ourselves and right the federal balance that was intended for us by the ratifiers. So Michael has done a wonderful job of getting this show on the road. You know, people try to malign us, they call us tenters. But we embrace that word. We like the word tenters. You know, we don't care, I'm proud of it. You can call me a tenter all day. Now, you'll find a lot of people that deny the 10th Amendment, just like they deny the Second, because the Second Amendment is in the headlines right now. You know, they want to quash it, and infringing on your liberty is not really taking away from the Second Amendment. But if you read this book, which is a great book, so I refer to it, infringing in the language of the founders, meant to impede or to destroy. There's a reason why they use that word infringe. And infringe, in their understanding, meant you don't touch this. And the federal government was not given the right to touch that ownership. Right? So there isn't no, there's a reasonable Second Amendment right. No, there's no reasonable about it. It says what it says. You can't infringe upon it. You can't touch it. You don't have the right to delegate anything in this authority. And I've got a nice little retort for that I'll hang out in a little bit. So we have this, limited powers government that even from the beginning with the framers, if you look in Federalist 4 to 5, Madison says the powers delegated to the proposed Constitution and the federal government are few and defined. Those which to remain to the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Now that's in the Federalist. The Federalist was before the ratification debates. It circulated largely in southern New York. It wasn't like it blanketed the entire 13 states at that time. But it's referred to a lot today because it was probably the most successful of all the marketing items at that time. So it's referred to a lot, but it's a document more of intent than what was agreed to. And the understanding that the Union would be one of sovereign states, where do we get that from? We get that from the ratification conventions. Because even Madison said, if you want to look to see the meaning of the Constitution, just look at the ratification debates. Because there you have the countries agreeing to, remember, sovereign states in separate countries. Okay, there you have the agreement of what they were agreeing to. Carrie Baker ran it through the Senate. Okay? There are references upon references in the summary about how this makes us compliant with Real ID, and yet they go around saying they never did that. And also in that same legislature were guys that went on to Washington and voted for NDA and Patriot Act extensions, Dennis Ross, Sandy Adams, Daniel Webster, Bill Posey. Okay? They went to Washington and continued violating civil liberties. Arizona has a Real ID Act of Prohibition. It was signed by the governor in 6/17 of 08. Okay? Now this is a Department of Homeland Security initiative, but Arizona has a prohibition against it, and it was signed by the governor. Guess who the governor was? Janet Napolitano. But we can't get Real ID prosecuted in Tallahassee. We can't do that. And which is another reason why we have to give support to guys like John Holman and Paul Henry, because you have to have a face up there with these guys. Emails alone won't do it. So we have states that have either enacted prohibitions against Real ID, the funding of it. Pennsylvania signed Act number 38 on May 31st, which made it nullified in the state of Pennsylvania. We don't recognize it as a law. We're not going to obey it. Okay. Indiana has a Sheriff's First Act in process right now, which says that federal officers are not considered sheriffs. They must check in with the sheriff before they do anything. That they do not supersede the sheriff's authority. Great act. Great act. And then we come to the one that everybody wants to talk. This is the one that's got the phones buzzing. This is what people want to know about. The Second Amendment. What can we do about the Second Amendment? And I'm glad we saw something. There was a postcard being handed out, I think, to Governor Scott. This is what needs to happen in Florida. You take one of those and pass that out. If I can get you to pass one. This is our Second Amendment Preservation Act. And I think I've got enough copies to go around. It's real simple, it's short, it's only two-sided. And what it does, we'll go through, because I know this is going to excite you. This is probably the whole point of me being here. Let me read the statement of intent, the Florida Second Amendment Preservation Act. The intent of this legislation is to reject any and all power or influence or interference of and by the federal government regarding the right to keep and bear arms, including ammunition, and to prohibit federal actors from infringing on these rights within the borders of Florida, and to prohibit state employees in aiding federal actors from infringing on these rights, and to provide felonious penalties of such. This is what we need. Okay? We don't hear anybody talk about this. There were 6 states yesterday afternoon that had rolled this out in their states. We don't even hear word one about this in our legislature. Okay? I've called those that'll take my phone calls. I've told them, well, our bills are filled. We only get 6 slots in the house. We're kind of full up. It was real important that I get that pest control bill passed for working. You know, you have to put this on hold. But this is the ticket right here. Look at C. All federal acts, laws, orders, rules, or regulations regarding civilian-owned firearms, firearm accessories, ammunition are in violation of the Second Amendment of the United States and the 10th Amendment of the United States and the Constitution. And what this does in short, it says Florida doesn't recognize federal firearm laws, and if you try to come in here and implement it, we will arrest you and put you in jail. Can't get more simple than that. Because that's what the American insurgents would have did in the 1770s. That's what they would have did. And that's what we need to get back to today. Okay, Robert E. Lee, after the war was over, he got a letter from Lord Acton, a British historian and philosopher, and asked him about the war. And Lee responded, he said, "I can only say that while I have considered the preservation of the constitutional power of the general government to be the foundation of our peace and safety at home and abroad, I yet believe the maintenance of the rights and authority reserved to the states and the people, not only essential to the adjustment and balance of the general system, but the safeguard to the continuance of a free government. I consider it as the chief source of stability to our political system, whereas the consolidation of the states into one vast republic, sure to be aggressive abroad and despotic at home, will be the certain precursor of that ruin which has overwhelmed all those that have preceded." And look at the republics that got too big, most notably Rome in prior years. Somebody mentioned the legal wars that we were involved in as their hot button. Aggressive abroad, are we not there? Despotic at home, are we not there? And so as the citizens and employers of our state legislature, we need to get these people on board and tell them, look, there's a 9th and there's a 10th Amendment for a reason. There's a power to interpose on our behalf and a power to push back against the federal government for a reason. If it costs 5% of transportation money, so be it. But the federal government's not empowered to build highways either. Okay? That idea is as old as the hills. They brought that idea to Madison during his first term in office. He said, I love the idea of connecting the states together by roads, but we need an amendment. Bring me an amendment, and then we'll find the money. They don't have the power. So if they're going to say keep their transportation funds, let them keep their transportation funds. We're going to have to make some sacrifices. Like Justice Scalia said, if you want to enforce the 10th Amendment, stop taking the money. So we're going to have to make some adjustments and stop taking the money. But it can be done. You guys are going to do it. I'm not a political guy. Alex, you guys know how to get people elected. You know how to get things done. You got to get the federal supremacists out. You've got to get the people in government that understand the federal government is limited. We've reserved a vast body of rights for ourselves, and get this thing turned around. Because every day that we don't is a day shorter. It's a day less. And the more they consolidate power, the more our freedoms are limited. So thanks for listening to me today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yes, sir.
I think a question a lot of us are trying to answer is as far as Obamacare being on the front doorstep and